To lay a hand on the royal cubs of Valemore was a crime punishable by the executioner's axe. Wren Ashby knew this better than anyone in the castle. She had scrubbed the very courtyard stones where traitors knelt for their final breath. And yet, on the coldest night of the year, when two shivering, half-shifted wolf pups scratched at the door of the laundry cellar, she did not think of the axe. She thought only of how small they looked and how badly they were shaking. She had no way of knowing that their father, Alpha King Draven Voss, a man the Border Kingdoms called the Iron Wolf, was already awake 3 floors above her, pacing his empty chambers, following a scent he could not yet place. The keep of Valemore had not seen true sunlight in 5 months. Black cloth hung from every rampart, snapping in the wind like a wound that refused to close. It had been 143 days since Queen Leora, maid to the Alpha King and mother to his twin sons, had been torn apart by rival pack assassins on the Eastern Trade Road. Her death had not simply widowed a king. It had cracked the foundation of an entire territory. But the deepest damage had been done to 2 4-year-old boys named Kale and Rowan. In wolf kind, a pup's first bond is scent deep. The mother's warmth is the compass by which a young wolf learns the world is safe. Without Leora, her sons had lost that compass entirely. They stopped shifting back into their human skin. They refused food from the royal nursemaid's hands. Their claws had grown too sharp for their age, and their nightly howls, thin, lost, heartbroken sounds, carried through the stone halls until even the castle guards flinched at the noise. Physicians came from as far as the coastal packs. Healers burned sacred herbs and murmured old rites over the boys' cribs. Nothing worked. The Alpha King, a man who had never once lost a battle in 20 years of border war, was losing his own children to grief, and there was no enemy he could put a blade through to fix it. Far below the nursery, in the smoke-blackened cellar where the castle's linens were boiled and its floors were scrubbed, none of this mattered to Wren Ashby. Grief was a luxury of the palace floors above. Down here, grief did not excuse a burnt pot or a misload of washing. Wren was 19, an orphan from the river town of Millhollow, sold into service at 12 when the fever took her parents and left debts too large for a child to pay off any other way. She slept in a narrow alcove behind the copper boilers, on a mattress stuffed with straw that poked through its seams. Her possessions numbered exactly 3: a moth-eaten shawl, a tin cup, and a sliver of soap that smelled faintly of dried chamomile, a gift from a peddler who'd once taken pity on her chapped hands. She was, in the strict hierarchy of a wolf court, less than nothing. A human servant among an entire nation of apex predators. Invisible by design and safer for it. It was the last week of autumn when the order of things quietly came undone. A storm had rolled down from the northern peaks that night, hard enough to rattle the iron shutters and send drafts knifing under every door in the keep. Wren had collapsed onto her mattress hours after midnight, her palms raw from scrubbing lye into the banquet hall floors, when a sound reached her through the dark. Scratching. Low, frantic, and worse, accompanied by a whimper that was entirely too close to a sob. She sat up slowly, heart hammering. Rats did not whimper like that. Creeping to the edge of her mattress, she peered into the gloom near the boiler room door and found 2 small shapes huddled together on the frozen stone. They were larger than any dog she'd seen, their fur a rough patchwork of soot-black and burnished copper, their limbs oddly long for their size. When the smaller one lifted its head, twin amber eyes caught the dying firelight, and Wren's breath left her in a rush. She knew those eyes. Every servant in the castle knew those eyes. They belonged to the crown princes. Panic seized her chest like a fist. The Pact of Valemore was etched in old stone and older blood. No human hand touches the royal line. If a guard found the princes here, filthy and freezing in a scullery girl's quarters, there would be no trial. Only rope. Go, she hissed, waving frantically. You can't be here. Go back upstairs, please go. Neither pup moved. The smaller one, who she would later learn was named Rowan, let out a broken sound and stumbled a step closer, his whole body trembling. The larger pup, Kale, planted himself in front of his brother and bared needle-sharp milk teeth, but his back legs shook just as badly as Rowan's. They weren't threatening her. They were starving, terrified, and freezing to death in front of her. Every instinct Wren had ever been taught screamed at her to run for the guards, to save her own neck. Instead, she found herself sliding off the mattress and sinking to her knees, making herself small so she wouldn't loom over them. "It's all right," she whispered, unwinding her one good shawl from around her shoulders. "I've no silk to offer you, little lords. Only a fire and a blanket that's seen better days." Cale's growl faltered. He sniffed the air, with smoke, lye soap, and the faint green scent of chamomile, and something in it must have told him she meant no harm, because the fight went out of his small shoulders. He nudged his brother forward, and together the two princes of Valemore crawled directly into Wren's lap. She wrapped the shawl around them with hands that would not stop shaking. Beneath the dirt, their fur was impossibly soft. Within minutes, pressed against her warmth and the last heat of the boiler fire, their frantic shivering eased into the slow, even breath of sleep, the first peaceful sleep either boy had known in nearly 5 months. Wren sat frozen against the brick wall until dawn, too afraid to move, cradling what she understood, with total clarity, to be a death sentence. And yet she could not bring herself to set it down. She told herself it was a single strange night, a fluke born of the storm. But when the scratching returned the following evening, and the one after that, Wren understood she had stumbled into something far bigger than herself. By the 3rd week, it had become an unspoken ritual. Every night, long past the hour the keep fell silent, the cellar latch would click open and 2 small shapes would pad across the stone floor. They no longer hesitated at her mattress. They climbed straight into the curve of her body and tugged the shawl over themselves with their teeth, as though she were furniture they had simply claimed. Wren began saving scraps from the kitchen, roasted marrow, strips of venison, hiding them in the folds of her apron to feed the princes, by hand in the dark. She fashioned a rough comb from a splintered piece of pine wood and worked the soot from their fur one matted section at a time. She hummed the lullabies her mother used to sing in Mill Hollow, low against their ears, until their breathing slowed and steadied. By day, the keep remained a battlefield dressed up as a court. King Draven was fraying visibly at the seams, and his general, a broad-shouldered wolf named Halgrim Van, was quietly using that unraveling to his advantage. Halgrim argued in closed councils that a grieving king was a weak king, and that feral, motherless heirs were proof the bloodline itself was cracking beyond repair. It was the kind of talk that, left unchecked, ended in a coup. Wren witnessed the rot firsthand one gray afternoon, hauling slop toward the pig pens. She found General Halgrim in the courtyard, backhanding a stable boy so hard the child crumpled into the mud, his lips split open. Wren froze, her bucket forgotten in her hands, and before Halgrim could strike again, a vicious snarl tore across the stones. Cale and Rowan, still locked in their half-wolf shapes, had bolted from the keep entrance. Cale planted himself between the general and the sobbing boy, snapping at Halgrim's boots. Rowan flanked him, small body rigid, eyes flashing with something far older than 4 years. "Control your beasts, Alpha," Halgrim called up toward the balcony, sneering. Wren followed his gaze and found King Draven watching from above, tall, dark-haired, with eyes the pale gray of a winter sky. He said nothing to Halgrim. He only watched his sons defend a stranger's child. And then Cale turned his head across the crowded courtyard, gaze locking directly onto Wren. He didn't run to her. He was too clever, even then, to give her away. But his tail gave one single, unmistakable wag. Draven did not miss it. His gaze tracked from his son, across the yard, to the soot-streaked girl clutching a bucket by the pens, and something in his expression sharpened into a question he did not yet have words for. That night, in his private study, Draven could not concentrate on the border reports scattered across his desk. For 3 weeks, the night terrors that had haunted the nursery had simply stopped. His sons vanished from their beds after midnight and reappeared by breakfast, coats glossy, bellies full despite refusing every royal meal set before them. And there was the scent. A wolf's nose does not lie, and for days a strange perfume had clung to his son's fur beneath their natural scent of pine and rain, with smoke, lye, and the unmistakable green note of dried chamomile. They are finding comfort somewhere, Draven thought, pacing. Or with someone. The thought lit something fierce and protective in his chest. If an enemy, Halgrim's faction, or worse, had found a way to manipulate his heirs in the dead of night, it was a breach he could not ignore, whatever tenderness might be tangled up in it. He waited until the castle fell silent, then trailed his sons from the nursery himself, needing no light to follow a scent he now knew as well as his own blood. Down past the grand stair, through the old armory, into the narrow servants' stair that led to the cellars. The air here smelled of damp stone and stale bread, an unlikely place for royal heirs to willingly descend. He found the cellar door ajar and pushed it open. The room beyond was a narrow, freezing alcove lit only by the embers of a dying boiler fire. And there, on a mattress thin enough to see the floor beneath it, was a sleeping girl, stood on her cheek, dark hair loose across a threadbare pillow, with his sons curled against her, wrapped in a shawl worn through at the elbows. Cale's head rose and fell with her breathing. Rowan was tucked beneath her chin, one of her raw, blistered hands resting protectively over his flank. They looked, for the first time in 5 months, entirely safe. Draven's boot scraped the stone, and Wren's eyes flew open. For one heartbeat, she was disoriented, and then she saw the massive shape of the Alpha King filling the doorway, his pale eyes fixed on her in the dark, and every drop of blood in her body turned to ice. She scrambled back against the brick, pulling the shawl tighter around the pups, bracing for a roar that would bring the guards running, for the cold flash of a blade. Instead, Draven went very, very still. Cale woke first, hackles rising at the presence of another alpha, and put himself bodily between his father and the girl, barking a sharp warning. Rowan woke a heartbeat later and did the same, baring milk teeth at the king himself. Draven's eyes widened. His own sons, heirs to the Iron Wolf throne, were guarding a human scullery girl against him. "Peace, little wolves," he murmured, dropping slowly to one knee so he would not loom. His gaze found Wren over his son's small, bristling forms. "What is your name, girl?" "Wren, your grace." Her voice shook. "I swear on the old gods, I never lure them here. They were freezing. I only meant to warm them." "I know," Draven said quietly, and the admission stunned her into silence more thoroughly than any threat could have. He reached out, let Cale sniff his knuckles, and scratched gently behind his son's ear. "I have tracked this scent for days. You hold no magic, Wren of Millhollow. Yet you have done what my finest healers could not. You gave them peace." He rose to his full height. "Tomorrow you will not report to the kitchens. You will be moved to the East Wing. You are the prince's warden now, by my direct order, and anyone who questions it answers to me." By noon the next day, Wren stood in a sunlit chamber hung with tapestries, bathed and dressed in wool fine enough to make her hands feel like they belonged to someone else. It was an elevation without precedent in Valemor's history, and it made her a target overnight. General Halgrim's entire strategy depended on a broken king and feral heirs. The sudden, undeniable recovery of the princes, now eating heartily, now laughing as they chased each other barefoot through the corridors, now slowly, miraculously shifting back into their human skins during the day, was unraveling everything he had built. He met with his co-conspirator, a merchant lord named Ashenvale who controlled the northern grain routes, in the damp cellar beneath the armory. "The king is blinded by a peasant," Halgrim snarled, pacing among the ale casks. "She hums a few lullabies, feeds them scraps, and the council believes the bloodline is saved. My leverage is bleeding out with every day that girl stays in that castle." Ashen's eyes glittered. "Then we remove her. And the boys with her if it comes to that, but quietly. A tragedy of human treachery would serve us better than an accident. If the maid is blamed for poisoning them, Draven loses his heirs and his mind in the same hour. The pack will beg you to take the throne to restore order." Halgrim's scarred mouth curled. "The founding day feast is in 3 days. The king will present the princes to the allied lords himself. Procure wolfsbane, the concentrated tincture. We lace the ceremonial venison. When the boys fall, the vial will be found among the scullery maid's things. For 3 days Wren lived on knife's edge, aware of the resentful stares that followed her through corridors once forbidden to her. She never left the prince's side, read to them from old human storybooks, coaxed them gently through their shifts, watched with quiet wonder as Draven wept once, silently, behind a half-closed door, the first tears he had allowed himself since his wife's death. But dread coiled tighter in her stomach as the feast approached. The great hall on Founding Day was a sea of velvet and candlelight, allied lords and ladies feasting at long oak tables while war drums and lute music rolled off the vaulted ceiling. Wren stood in the shadows behind the high table, watching Cale and Rowan seated proudly at their father's side, small and dignified in their formal collars. When the ceremonial course arrived, a great silver platter of rare venison, it was General Halgrim himself who carried it forward, bowing low before the king. "To the long life of the royal heirs," he announced, and the hall erupted in cheers as he set 2 plates before the boys. Years scrubbing pots with 100 different herbs and cleaning agents had given Wren a sense of smell sharper than most humans. As steam rose from the meat, cutting through rosemary and garlic, she caught something beneath it, sweet, earthy, faintly bitter, like damp soil and crushed almonds. Wolfsbane. Cale reached for his fork with a hungry smile.
No.
The word tore out of Wren before fear or protocol could stop it. She lunged from the shadows, shoved past 2 startled guards, and swept the silver plates from the table. They clattered violently to the stone, venison scattering across the flagstones. The hall fell into dead silence. "Seize her!" Halgrim roared, his face a mask of manufactured outrage. "The human has lost her mind. She attacks the princes at their own table." 2 guards slammed Wren to the floor, pain exploding through her shoulder. She twisted to find Draven already on his feet, fury and confusion warring in his expression. "My king, the meat is poisoned," she gasped. "Wolfsbane, I smelled it, please don't let them eat it." A desperate lie. Ashenvale cut in smoothly, stepping forward. "She means to disgrace your house, Alpha, or worse, to poison the boys herself and lay the blame elsewhere. Search her quarters." Halgrim drew his dagger, advancing on her pinned body. "Treason is punished by death, human. You've overstepped for the last time." Before the blade could fall, a dual snarl split the hall. Cale and Rowan did not cower behind their father. In perfect unison, the 2 boys shifted, small human frames rippling into fur and muscle, and stood over Wren's body as 2 half-grown wolves. Cale clamped his jaws around the wrist of the guard, pinning her until the man screamed and let go. Rowan drove Halgrim back with a savage snap at his boots. The entire hall gasped. 4-year-old princes were fighting with the precision of grown alphas to protect a human girl. Enough. The word cracked through the hall like a whip. Draven vaulted the high table and landed between his sons and Halgrim, and the sheer weight of his alpha presence drove half the room to its knees. He did not look at Wren. He crouched over the spilled venison and inhaled once, deeply, peeling back the layers of rosemary and blood, and there it was, faint and bitter beneath the rest. Wolfsbane. When Draven straightened, his eyes had gone entirely black, the mark of an alpha pushed to the edge of lethal fury. He turned toward Ashenvale, sweating openly now, and then toward Halgrim. "You meant to murder my sons in my own hall," Draven said, and his voice was a whisper that somehow reached every corner of the room. "Alpha, no, the human lies, she..." Halgrim never finished. Draven crossed the distance between them in a blur, closing one hand around his general's throat and lifting him clean off the floor. "You question my grief," he snarled, fangs lengthening. "You question my bloodline. But worst of all, you underestimated the loyalty of the one who saved them." A single, sickening crack silenced the hall for good. Draven let the body fall. Ashenvale dropped to his knees, already begging, and the royal guard dragged him away before he could finish a sentence. Slowly, Draven's eyes bled back to gray. He turned from the wreckage and crossed the hall to where Wren still knelt, guards scrambling out of his path. Cale and Rowan pressed their noses to her hands, whining softly until she found the strength to rise. Draven stopped in front of her and, to the disbelief of every noble in the room, sank to one knee, the Alpha King of Valemore kneeling before a kitchen maid. He reached out and brushed a tear from her soot-streaked cheek with a thumb that had, moments ago, ended a man's life. "You risked the gallows to warm them," he said, quiet enough that only she and his sons could hear it first, though his voice carried by the end. "You risked the blade to save them. You carry no claws, Wren of Millhollow, and still you are the fiercest protector in this keep." He rose, drawing her up with him, and turned to face the stunned hall. "Hear me," he said, and his voice filled the vaulted ceiling like a bell. "The Age of Shadows in Valemore ends tonight. This woman is no servant. She is the one who kept my bloodline breathing when I could not. Anyone who questions her place at my side answers to me." Wren looked down at Cale and Rowan, sitting proudly at her feet, tails sweeping the stone floor, and then up at the king who had just rewritten the laws of his own kingdom in front of every lord in the north. She had come to Valemore as an orphan with nothing but a tin cup and a sliver of soap. She was, for the first time in her life, not invisible at all. From the coldest cellar in the keep to the right hand of the Alpha King, Wren Ashby had proven something the wolves of Valemore would tell their pups for generations, that a crown is not the only thing that can hold a kingdom together. Sometimes, all it takes is one warm heart that refuses to let go.